everyone, and welcome to this week's edition of the Geeking Out podcast. I am the Athletic Geek, and I'm very excited about this episode. One of the people that really got me into YouTube, really got me interested in creating videos, creating content, and just being a part of the YouTube wrestling community is my guest this week. Uh, Joe Gagne is my guest, and Joe, thank you so much. This is awesome to finally get to talk to you.
Hey, no problem. Glad to be here.
Uh, so my first question that I'm sure you've answered before on your podcast or on your channel, what got you interested in professional wrestling? What made you a fan?
A lot of people they say they have these light bulb moments. They're flipping across the TV. They come across Hulk Hogan or Steve Austin or something wild, and they're hooked. And I really don't remember when I started watching. I can pin it back to about 1983, just because I used to watch with my cousins at my grandmother's house on Saturday mornings. Based on where she lives, it would have been about 1983. And as long as I can remember, I've always just been a fan. It's just always been a part of my life. Sometimes, more emphatic fandom than others, but always, always following and always watching.
Awesome. So 1983. This is still the territory days, and right before Vince kind of took over the world. Who were the wrestlers that were kind of grabbing your attention, if you remember? Did you have a particular favorite? Did you have a particular storyline from early in your fandom that really you kind of feel nostalgic about when you go back to it?
Oh, I mean, I was a huge fan of Hulk Hogan. I mean, don't listen. Kids loved Hulk. Every kid loved Hulk Hogan because kids love front runners, and Hulk Hogan always won, so he was your favorite. And but also, I remember Ricky Steamboat was also a huge fan of him, and the whole storyline with him and Randy Savage, where he jumped on him with the ring bell and crushed his throat and the whole thing, and Bruno Sammartino gets involved, calls Savage a piece of slime, and the whole build to WrestleMania 3 is like, they don't make them like that anymore, I gotta say.
I was just gonna kind of go off of that. Not trying to make anyone feel old or anything, but WrestleMania 3 was a little before my time, and I keep hearing everybody, like when I go back and watch it, that's just it's so magical. What was it like being a fan, before the internet, before we all had these kind of outlets to where we might become a little bit more jaded or more cynical? What was it like just experiencing the build up to Hulk versus Andre, Steamboat versus Savage, and then even some of the undercard stuff with Jake the Snake and the Honky Tonk Man and the British Bulldogs? What was being a wrestling fan like leading up to WrestleMania 3?
I mean, it was a lot of fun. It was just like so much excitement. Like, I mean, the Hogan Andre thing, I couldn't believe this was happening. Like, oh my God, like, it's really tough to compare any kind of match today having that effect that Hogan Andre had, because that had been built for years and years, and Andre, you never saw him lose, and he's a bad guy, and it's crazy. Like, I know it probably seems archaic now. There was no there was no network. There was just a couple shows on, probably the
Right.
weekends. Unless you had a VCR and you missed it, it was gone forever. But
Yeah.
yeah, I just love those times. The 4 pay-per-views a year. You had Saturday Night's Main Event were a big thing, and you never knew like when they were coming. You had a rough idea when they happened in the year, but you'd get that TV guide and you'd scan to see if it was listed for that upcoming Saturday, and just yeah, I mean, fandom was just it was a lot of fun back then. I mean, it's still fun now, but it was
Right.
different. I'm glad I got to experience it in that manner.
So you were a WWF kid growing up, or did you ever, kind of see what uh, AWA or World Class or Crockett were doing, or were you kind of loyal to the WWF camp?
Yeah, I was kind of a loyal WWF guy. They're the group that always ran live shows around here. The NWA ran a couple things, but it was either in Boston or other areas. Kind of stayed away, so that was kind of like I could always go see them live. The WWF, and it just seemed like more suited for me as a kid. Like this is what I want out of my wrestling.
Now, as you grow older, did your tastes kind of change any? Because once upon a time I was WWF through and through, and now Not so much. That's another debate for another day. But did you kind of have that similar epiphany, or did you just did was it always WWF? Did you get interested in the Monday Night Wars? Did you get interested in ECW as you grew up? What was there a timeline?
So
I guess.
yeah, I was. I mean, I was watching like Crockett and stuff like that. I didn't have the emotional attachment I did to the WWF, but when WWF got a lot sillier, I remember like Papa Shango made the Ultimate Warrior barf. All that 91 to 95 was when I was in high school, and that was kind of like the low point of the WWF in terms of popularity. And you didn't let anyone know you were a wrestling fan
Right.
back then. I wasn't buying magazines or going to a ton of shows. It was just kind of something I watched on the weekend in secret. But I certainly, I was still watching TV. I was aware of everything that was going on. And when I started college in 95, that was right at the start of the Monday Night Wars. And also when I got online. And a lot of people kind of curse the internet. Like, oh, everyone's so jaded, it's ruined wrestling. But for me, it was great because I had people I could share this with now. Like, I had no one I
Right.
could talk to. There was like no one I could talk to about wrestling. But not only were there people out there were people who were as nuts as I was about it, like even crazier in a way. People who could see. I learned about Smoky Mountain Wrestling, and ECW was like the big thing everyone was talking about at the time. And this was, I remember I would read these ECW show reports, at the ECW arena, and there wasn't like, nowadays, any company could put their weekly local TV show on YouTube. There wasn't anything like that in like 1995. There weren't even really pictures. It was just text I was reading about these shows that fascinated me. Like, oh, like reading about like the Sandman and Public Enemy and things like that. It just seemed incredible to me. So yeah, that's the first internet purchase I ever made. I bought 1995 ECW television set. It was like 8 VHS tapes for like $40, and that was like, I remember like, when I finally got those. Like it was right around summer of '96. I just went home and plowed through them, and it was just mind blowing.
I was gonna say, did this live up to the hype that you had kind of made for yourself in your head? Because I know a lot of times, I'm not knocking anything, but like I heard so much about the first Omega and Okada match, and it was a great match. I loved the match, but I heard like everybody talk like, "Oh, it broke Meltzer's system," and then like when I saw it, I'm like, "Oh, that wasn't like it's not my favorite match," and I still can think of like three other matches I like better. What's wrong with you people? Did you have that issue at all when you were with your ECW, or did it live up to the hype?
I think it lives up to the hype. A lot of it was a lot of those guys like Chris Benoit and Eddie Guerrero and Dean Malenko had shown up on Nitro, and I'd seen them and like just like, oh, these guys are tremendous. I remember I stumbled across like Eddie Guerrero and Jushin Liger on like WCW Pro. And I was like, what is going on? What is this? And Eddie Guerrero went with a frog splash. I'm like, oh, he's my favorite wrestler now. So a lot of those like, yeah, a lot of those guys I'd kind of got into and following the stories. Yeah, I think it completely lived up to the expectations I had.
um, a while back, I had uh, Brett Bahu FMW on the show, and I asked him about kind of the tape trading scene when he was first discovering FMW. So, were you involved in kind of at that point in time in the online wrestling community? Were you involved in tape trading to see international stuff, or more kind of I don't know if obscure is the right word, but we're going to kind of go with it. Promotions from the United States, like your Smoky Mountains, your ECWs, and whatnot. Big tape trader, were you just buying the stuff from websites?
I would pick up stuff now and then. I didn't really buy tapes till I got out of college and got an actual job. Because I mean, we had like there was a lot of wrestling on TV. We had all the stuff on Monday night. We started getting ECW in my area in '97.
Oh, nice.
You had like I was on the local Spanish network at like 1 in the morning on Saturdays. I
I, I'm
remember.
I'm envious of everybody that got ECW kind of pre-Attitude Era because I didn't get ECW personally till it went to TNN, and me not knowing that they were the innovators, I'm just kind of going like, "This is the ECW, everybody!" Like all the magazines and all my friends are talking about this. This is like stuff you'd see on Raw, like with the women and the stuff. It's like, what's so special about? Like, it wasn't bad, but I was just kind of like, so this is what you again, kind of the preconceived notion, but knowing what I know now, it's like, oh yeah, they still have that for ECW.
Yeah, you're like, oh, a guy drinking beer. Yeah, I remember the Sandman doing that.
Um, did you ever get to attend a real ECW show?
I never did, and it really bugs me. I never really. I was like because I was in college during really the height of ECW, and yeah, I didn't really have a car. They weren't really in the area except for a couple shows. I didn't even really know about the one of the shows where they had the Michinoku Pro guys come over was like a couple towns over. I didn't even really know about it. I'm still that's my big wrestling regret to this day. I didn't go to that show. I never really went to an ECW show. So I made sure I made up for it in a way as I went to a ton of Ring of Honor shows in the heyday. I made sure I went to a Dynamite when that was something you could do outside of Florida. You could actually attend a live
Right,
Dynamite.
exactly.
So I made
Um,
sure I didn't want to miss out again.
um, so kind of just transitioning off of that, do you have any memorable wrestling shows that you attended? You know, you mentioned a few that you have. Do you have like, did you ever get to do a WrestleMania? You obviously having a little bit of fame through YouTube and everything. You know, did you ever get invited to any shows or any anything of that nature? What are some of the memorable uh, wrestling events you've attended?
The only Mania I've done is the first one in MetLife Stadium, which was 29. I think it was the second Rock Cena match.
Okay,
That's the only one. That was the first I remember that just kind of being I mean, not but the big WrestleMania, like an all weekend kind of thing. It wasn't just like a couple shows
right.
here or there. So that was like non-stop wall-to-wall wrestling. I did that. I actually was in New York for the last Mania weekend, but I didn't go to Mania because
I was there. I was that. That was my first Mania. My last big trip before the world ended.
yeah, yeah, I know. I was like, oh, thank God that was in before all this nonsense happened.
Right. Oh yeah.
I actually got to do all that because I hit a bunch of shows. But I was like,
Well, what shows were
the
you
guy.
at?
Oh boy, I was at La Booms all that day. So I was at Evolve, WXW, and DDT.
The
The
ones I
next day, yep, next day I was at Takeover. I was at I think Rev Pro and that something. It was like,
I was at the Rev Pro show.
oh yeah, yeah, I was there too. That was
I was at the Rev Pro. I had to duck out like right after the Suzuki and ZSJ versus Osprey and Tanahashi match. So that way I could. Cause I don't know. I'm from the Midwest. I don't know New York. I don't know how long it's going to take to Uber to Brooklyn. So like I had to duck out before the main event, which I kind of felt bad about, but I came in just in time. So it's like good call.
yeah. No, I remember I was with the Cubs fan of LuchaBlog.com, and we ducked out during the main event because we're like we took the subway and we're like, yeah, we need to get going if we're gonna make it in time, and we just did. So yep, uh, went from that to being at the very top of the Barclays Center for that takeover.
Were you in the very last row?
I was pretty damn close.
I was in the last row, and I will give it credit. I had an excellent view of everything from the last row. Like I can't say it was a bad seat. It wasn't a bad seat. Just I made it where I was positioned. I don't know, but I'm like, well, I'm literally in the final row.
Yep. Yeah, I remember that the Barclays Center. You're just like looking straight down. It felt like from being that up high.
I always joked. I said the one good thing about being that high up is it had like a little perch behind you, and I'm like, oh, I have a table to set my drink on. That's great.
Mm.
um, kind of tangents aside, what got you interested in wrestling video games, and what was the first wrestling video game that you remember playing?
The first game I remember playing might have been pro wrestling on the NES. I've made this point before about how important wrestling video games are to wrestling fandom in general because, if you're a fan of baseball or basketball, you can go do those things in an organized environment. You can play Little League, you can play your local, basketball rec league or something. But if you're a fan of pro wrestling, you can't really experience what that's like on any level unless suplex your little brother or something, which is probably frowned upon in your household. So really the video games are the only way to really experience that for yourself. And I remember, I was podcasting long, long ago. I remember in 2006, I just did an episode on wrestling video games, and it got like this really big reaction. So kind of like, oh yeah, this is kind of a shared experience everyone has. Like everyone I felt played these, if you were of a certain age, you played WrestleFest in the arcade. You played Revenge or No Mercy.
Right.
These are kind of, the kind of that universal experience of a fan.
Um, so what I know on your YouTube channel, you always kind of go back to the WCW versus the World, or WCW versus NWO World Tour, excuse me. It's kind of like the benchmark of the golden age of wrestling gaming. What did you buy that game on your own? Did you have a friend that said, "Hey, you're check this out"? What got you interested in that game, and then subsequently, kind of the golden age and checking out all these others from there?
All right, so I was in college at the time, and I was like, I'm this big man on campus. I'm a hip guy. I'm done with video games. And I knew a kid who was also a wrestling fan. And he's like, hey, I got this new wrestling game. Do you want to come play it? I'm like, yeah, okay. And it was, yeah, WCW versus NWO World Tour. And I was like, oh my God, this is incredible. Because it was, you know, such a quantum leap. The last game I had played, I think, was Raw for the Sega Genesis. And if you look at what
Oh
the
yeah.
N64 game was compared to that, it's basically in 3D. They're like, 1,000 more moves. It's just an incredible increase in what you could do. So I'm like, well, I have to have this game and I have to have an N64. And I remember I worked at Blockbuster Video. I went back there because I had a job in the summer. I was like, I need some cash. So during my Christmas break, I went back there and worked. And I worked, I think, New Year's Eve that Christmas, and it was just like the worst night of my life. It was so ungodly busy. It sucked. People were screaming at me because there were no movies left because everyone rented them. But it didn't matter because I got the cash and I got myself an N64 in that. And once I heard there were sequels, I was all in because it's tough to really separate those games from the time period because I remember Revenge and just that was my senior year of college and that was just nonstop playing it with like uh, a dozen other people going back and forth with that. And I graduated in the WWF, No Mercy, and WrestleMania 2000 came out after that. I really don't have that same kind of feeling about those games because I was
Really?
by myself. Yeah,
Okay,
just because I
okay.
was I just played by myself. It was like, all right, I'll play this. It didn't have that communal party experience that
Gotcha.
Revenge did.
Because I always I always looked at like No Mercy as like, here's finally all the things about the other games. Like, well, if it had music, if Revenge had music, or World Tour had entrances, or Revenge had music, or if WrestleMania 2000 could fight backstage and had storylines, it'd be perfect. And like, I always looked at No Mercy as sort of like the culmination of it all built up to No Mercy in a way. But
Yeah, it is completely the more polished and complete game. But just my own personal, it's completely unfair, but my own personal memories of Revenge
gotcha.
make it kind of hard to top in that. Plus, also, WCW was so popular and good at the time. It's
Right.
just an interesting kind of footnote because given how when WCW was at its peak, they put out Revenge, and then they put out I forgot the EA Sports. Oh, Mayhem, where it was
Mayhem,
like,
yes.
yeah, when WCW was kind of starting to slip a little, and then they put out Backstage Assault when it was the pits. So it was kind of
It
weirdly mirrored.
mirrored almost with
Yeah,
Backstage Assault.
the success of the company at the time.
Um, so you're a big wrestling fan. You get an N64 to play wrestling games. Are you strictly a wrestling game guy, or kind of in this era with the N64? Are you are you playing GoldenEye? Are you playing Super Mario, Diddy Kong Racing? Are you playing some of the hits, or are you kind of strictly a wrestling game guy? Outside of wrestling, you have any favorites?
I mean, I always loved Star Fox 64 on the N64. I think that game is tremendous fun. But it was mainly wrestling games. I have a lot. I had like the the Attitude, the cruddy WWF one, and a couple other things. But I dabbled in other genres as well. But I mean, those wrestling games were my main diversion.
Awesome. Um, so the one thing, kind of a goofy question I always wanted to ask about somebody else who was into Revenge, just because I want to make sure I'm not like a complete loser. Um, so when I started playing Revenge, they always had the wrestlers at the very end that weren't like were takeoffs of the actual wrestlers from Japan. Did you ever think they were real people, or did you, since you were a little older, did you know, like, oh, these are, that guy's supposed to be Hayabusa, or that guy's supposed to be Misawa, or were you like me, watching Thunder, hoping that Hanzoman and Maya Inca Boy would one day be on Thunder?
No, I didn't think Dr. Frank would pop up on.
Dang.
No, I figured because I remember the first game they had actual Japanese wrestlers, a couple of whom I recognized because Taka Michinoku was in the game. And with this, I figured there's probably just a copyright thing, which I believe
Right.
was exactly the problem.
Yeah, it was. I guess that was me being 10 years old at the time and just hoping, like, when am I going to see Dr. Frank? He looked cool.
Yeah,
He's
I mean,
he's great. Yeah, I love playing as him.
yeah, I mean, what else would you expect? Like other people in the game are real, so why wouldn't this subset of characters be real?
Um, did you have a on either World Tour or Revenge? Did you kind of have a go to guy to play as?
Oh, I loved Saturn in Revenge because he could do, he was, you play against Kevin Nash, he's slow as molasses, but Saturn had like, he could do cool suplexes in the Death Valley Driver, and he also had like good high flying moves as well. So he was a lot of fun. Him and Booker T, I think, were always a lot of fun. They had
Awesome.
good moves, but yeah.
Um, so you mentioned you've been podcasting for like back in 2006. You said.
Yeah, that's when it started. Yep.
So what got you into? Because my first exposure to you was just YouTube. I, stumbled across your channel, and you were the first kind of YouTuber where I'm like, oh, I need to bin. I have not subscribed to this guy, and he's been making videos for however many years. It's time to binge watch this. But what got you into podcasting, and then subsequently what led to the venture into YouTube?
All right. So the podcasting, I somewhat of an online presence. Like, yeah, I'd write little columns or whatever nonsense, and podcast started to be a thing in 2004 and five. And I remember I used to listen to it was the Pure SO Power Hour. It was Keith Lipinski and Mike Sempervive way back then. They used to do these monster shows at the time, like 3 hours, and I used to listen to that on my computer while I played Tiger Woods on my PlayStation 2, and it was just a lot of fun. And the thing about podcasting is, it's something like if I had said to you, like, hey, make a television show and broadcast it, like, I don't know what kind of funding you have, but it probably wouldn't look quite network quality, and you
Right.
really would have a way to do it. But with podcasts, with a little bit of equipment, you can have a good sounding podcast that sounds just as good as something, whatever wrestler or personality is doing, and you can release it on the same platforms as they do. Like, Downcast, I have, podcasts from uh like famous wrestlers and podcasts from, just random fans, and they're both presented equally. So I kind of thought that would just be an interesting thing to try. And a lot of people weren't really doing it back then, so I just kind of got some equipment, and I knew some people online. I'm like, well, let's have guests on, and just kind of worked because I think I was one of the first. That was I think it was 15 years ago. I had the first episode of my podcast, which is still well, it was coming out sporadically. I've been pretty busy for a while. I haven't done one in a bit, but
Right.
yeah, that's just kind of the original. So I did podcasts for a few years. Did like I forget how many 60 or 70 episodes the first run, and then at the time I met my wife. I'd gotten married, so I kind of like didn't really have time or really interest in podcasting. I kind of put that aside. I still show up on shows now and then. If someone asked me to be on, I would just to scratch the itch. But as years go on, I thought, you know, what's something I can do? Because the podcast had become pretty prevalent at the time. Everyone was having one. I thought, what else could I do? A lot of time with the rise of YouTube and whatnot, talking about retro video games had started to become a big thing. There were a lot of shows with people reviewing classic Nintendo games and whatnot, but no one was really talking specifically about wrestling games. And if they were really talking about it as fans, just kind of more from a video game perspective. So I thought, well, that'd be kind of interesting to do. But I don't know anything about video editing, video capturing, anything like that. So I'm like, well, I don't know about that. At the same time, my friends Mike Falcone and Tom Green started to put together a website, uh, Mike and Tom, which is why the
Mhm.
YouTube channel is Mike and Tom Presents, in case you're wondering who
I
the heck Mike is.
That I was going to actually ask that. Like,
Yeah, that's where that comes from the original website. The website went kaput kind of quick, but yeah, I wrote to Tom. I was like, what if we did this? Like, I'll do the words and I'll record the audio, you do the video. He said, sure. We tried it out, and yeah, started pumping them out pretty quick, and it outlasted the website. And I forget how many episodes we have, but they're pretty evergreen. You can check them out, and yeah, that's kind of the origin of the YouTube series.
um, we're going to go back to YouTube, but you throughout your podcasting days, you're pretty well doing what I'm doing, or we're doing what I'm doing right now, and interviewing, you know, people. What were some of your memorable guests you had, and what was some? Did you have any like fun interactions? I know I'm still kind of new to the scene, so like anytime I reach out to anybody, I'm kind of like worried I'm going to sound stupid, or I'm like kind of still in the whole like oh, I hope I don't embarrass myself. Did you ever have any feelings or like that? Did you ever have any people kind of be rude? Did you have any people that were really cool? What were your
Yeah,
interactions like?
it's really just me talking to my friends about wrestling, which I
Okay.
think was kind of the appeal. I wasn't like trying to, um, you know, get big name wrestlers or anything like that, big name guests. It was just me talking to my friends about what was going on. We talked about everything. We do shows about Lucha and WWF and Ring of Honor and okay, a couple MMA shows in there, just a couple of things. So I was never really like, it was just me talking to my friends, and hopefully my friends are entertaining. And that was kind of the appeal. I was never really like, I'm gonna try to find big name s because who was like, it was like anyone in the WWE was ever gonna be on my
Right.
dumb little podcast, and kind of independent wrestlers, above a certain level probably wouldn't do it. I could probably, if I want to talk to local guys, but I don't know how interesting that is. And I just remember, I would just talk on forums with my friends, and yeah, it was fun and we laughed. So it was basically let's do that in audio format.
Um, Getting back to YouTube, uh, it's been a few years now since we've had a new episode of the Funtime Pro Wrestling Arcade. What, if you don't mind me asking, what led to kind of you taking a step back from that project?
Well, part of it's life. I know Tom and we both have families, both have jobs. My job has just gotten kind of crazy in the last couple of years. Don't have a ton of free time. And the series used to be easy when I was, talking about WrestleFest. I wrote that script like pretty much off the top of my head. I didn't have to research anything because I knew everything about that game. Because a lot of those, the NES games, N64, I knew back and forth, and there wasn't really a ton to go into. Something like WrestleFest or the 16-bit games. There weren't a ton of modes or a ton of wrestlers. But as we get further along and deeper into like SmackDown games, I have to play them a lot to get familiar with them and kind of figure out, all right, what's changed, what's different, what's new, and it's a lot more time consuming. I don't have a lot of kind of older systems. I don't have like a GameCube or anything, so I'd have to try to track those down, and just kind of like I covered a lot of what I really wanted to cover when the series started. I wanted to do like the arcade games and the N64 games and things like that. So you know, I, I still want to do like Here Comes the Pain and all that, and a couple of those. But I covered a lot of what I wanted to do. It gets more complex the further along you get, and it's just kind of like life just don't have the time I used to. Sadly, when I started doing the show.
Well, I do hope one day you come back because I was really excited about Shut Your Mouth. And that's right where it ended.
Yeah.
But I totally understand, totally respect the decision. You've covered a wide variety of known games, unknown games, uh, foreign games. Of all the ones that you've kind of found, and ones you would discover, what's the one that surprised you with how much you enjoyed playing it the most? If you could pick one.
Well, I think Virtual Pro Wrestling 2 is probably my favorite game of all time, just because you know I just remember kind of ordering it because I had gotten out of school, I had a job, so I had a little extra cash, and I remember, hey, there's a game like WrestleMania 2000 from Japan, and you can play it. And I remember I had to like like print out a translation code because it was all in Japanese, of course, but it was pretty much in the format of WrestleMania 2000. And I remember just how much I really loved that game because that game had, in addition to everything good about the N64 games and all that, it also had the shoot fighting mode, which is also kind of a lot of fun and something that sadly, I mean, it's not like they could do it with the WWF unless you had a brawl for all kind of mode. But I mean, that one kind of surprised me how much fun it was and how much I kept revisiting that over the years. That really taught me a lot about Japanese wrestling because I'd be like, oh, this guy, and this is his move and his taunt, and well, clearly he's positioned very highly in this company, and things like that. So it's kind of I give that one a boost as well because it really taught me a lot and really helped make me a fan of Japanese wrestling.
Did you have a go-to character on Virtual Pro Wrestling too?
I always love using Kobashi or any of the Dragon Gate guys that were in there. I think Dragon Kid, Magnum Tokyo, and Shima were in there. So
Awesome.
those guys were always fun.
Awesome. Um, is there a game that you feel doesn't get, at least online, the credit that it deserves that you've played in your reviews?
I'm trying to think back to. I think everything is pretty properly rated. I can't think of one
Gotcha.
game where everyone's like yuck. Where I'm like, no, no, no. Backyard Wrestling is really a great game. No, I think everything is kind of. I mean, some stuff I may like a hair more than other people, but given the general consensus, I think things are pretty properly rated out there.
Flip side of that, is there any you think are overrated, or is it still kind of the same thing?
No, kind of the same thing. The games everyone talks about, the games I still love to play. You could pick nits, but yeah, I still think those N64 games are great fun. Still tremendous. I mean, a lot of people might think they're a little too slow these days.
Right.
I don't know about that. To me, it works pretty perfectly.
Have you been able to, in recent years, the WWE games have been got a lot of criticism, right or wrong. Uh, have you played the 2K games, and what do you feel could improve the 2K games if you've played them?
I mean, I haven't played a new game in like
Gotcha.
I think like 6 or 7 years. It's just kind of been a while because things aren't really don't seem to be changing all that much
Right.
as things go on. So I can't say. I think it's good they took a year off. They put out Battlegrounds. I didn't play that. I didn't hear great things, but I mean, I don't know. I don't know what they could do in
Gotcha.
terms of I can't say I wouldn't mind saying, but I'm who knows.
Right. Um, with your YouTube getting fairly popular, did that allow you any kind of monetization, or did you ever like get anything? What, as you got more popular, like how did the production and the money and everything like that change as far as what you put into your content, both on the podcast and on the YouTube channel?
No, nothing really changed. I never I never got we did you know we sold a couple ads for a couple episodes and whatnot and things like that. We put out some T-shirts on Pro Wrestling Tees, still out there if you want to get one. But yeah, I never made any substantial money off of it. And I didn't really expect to. It was just something I enjoyed doing. It's a nice way to be creative and have a good sized audience. As you go through your regular job and the responsibilities of adulthood. It's just really to me just a fun way to creatively express myself.
No, no doubt about that. That is what got me started here. And um, in recent years, the YouTube wrestling scene has gotten quite larger. We have, I mentioned monetization. We have other channels that discuss pro wrestling, that where the people on there, can literally pay their mortgage and pay their bills with being on YouTube. Was that ever a goal for you, or was it always just kind of keep things in perspective and always have a real job to fall back on?
Yeah, no, I never wanted to really make this my career. That sounds terrifying to me, to be honest. Because tomorrow YouTube could be like, "Oh, we're changing our monetization rules," and you get a quarter of what you were expecting, and then it's like, okay, what now? Like that sounds absolutely. I mean, anyone can do it. Fair play to them. Best of luck. But that sounds. I would never sleep if that that was my lot in life.
Right. Um, on the same token as that, with all these new, I want to say new because I mean it's been a long time, but since the YouTube wrestling scene has exploded in the wrestling world and all the different channels, have you ever gotten to interact with any of these people that are kind of carrying the banner for wrestling on YouTube right now? Oh, or
Not
gaming
I,
for that matter.
not really either, unless I mean, you know, you might get like name dropped here or there, like maybe, but not nothing terribly recent. No one's ever reached out like, hey, what's going on, with you or anything like that. I remember that kind of that wrestling with pixels book that came
Right.
out. That was kind of a big. I mean, I guess it's finally coming out, or I don't know what the status of that big Kickstarter deal. They asked like, "Hey, you want to be involved?" I said, "Yeah, that sounds great," and I never heard from them ever again. So that's kind of the extent of it. So, but no,
Gotcha.
nothing. Yeah,
Have you played the Retrofest yet?
I
That's
have
the.
not yet. No.
Oh, dang! I was really hoping to get your opinion on that one, but maybe that'll be saved for another time when you finally get a chance to play it.
Yeah, no, I'll gladly give that a try because it's really interesting
Right.
that
Uh,
they're picking up the banner. They're the official sequel, and I just think it's kind of interesting what they did roster wise. We'll have to see.
I did whenever I first saw that this game was coming out. You're the first person I thought of. I'm like, I remember him saying on his review, "Hey, why don't WWE just do this and make it an app or charge people online to play it once a month or something with an updated roster?" And I'm like, "Yeah, that'd be cool." And then like I'm seeing that it's not a WWE game, but I'm like, "Oh, hey, they're they're doing WrestleFest again. Isn't that cool?"
Yeah,
It's
no, the WWF actually put out some app. It was really lame and bad. Like they put out like kind of a tap version of it, like for phones. It was really lame. No, they never did. So yeah, but good luck to the retro people. I had a call. I think I had a call with the guy. Just kind of, he shot some ideas by me. I think a long time ago. So it's cool to see it actually finally come to fruition.
um, one thing I kind of just jotted down on my notes as you were talking. You mentioned that you went to a lot of Ring of Honor shows. And I just want to ask you, do you have any particular favorites, memories of going to Ring of Honor back in the day, or even more recently?
I'm trying to think. Last Ring of Honor show I went to was in Madison Square Garden, which was
I was
there
at that
happened.
one.
All
Yes.
right, yeah. Not Ring of Honor. I mean, it kind of was their finest hour in terms of
Yes and no.
this huge crowd, but in terms of decisions they made, it was a little
It,
decidedly less so.
it was. Uh, I'm happy I got to see a show at Madison Square Garden, and I'm happy I got to reconnect with some friends from All In when I went. But I remember just kind of after the show happened thinking, I'm glad I got to see my friends again because this was not a show I would fly to.
Yeah, yeah. But in terms of Ring of Honor, I saw all kinds of good stuff. I went to pretty much all the Boston area shows. I mean, they never ran in Boston. It was always well outside,
Right.
but they called it that. I remember the first time Kenta and Marufuji came, and I was at the show where the building got canceled at the last second, and they had the show in a tent outside. And I remember it poured rain, and it actually like dripped water on my head, like water torture. I'm just trying to watch a show here, and but I did get to see Marufuji for the first and only time, so that was
That's
cool. But
cool.
I was I saw a lot of great wrestling.
Get to see any of the legendary Joe McGinnis or Danielson title reign.
Yeah, I saw a bunch of. I was at the show where Joe actually won the number one contenders trophy. I
Oh
think he went to
wow,
win the title the next week, and I saw a bunch of his. I saw him versus Styles, AJ Styles live.
nice.
I'm trying to think. Specific Joe singles matches. I saw him and Loki kind of match up. Not the original one. They were in a 4-way. The second anniversary show. That's where they created the pure title. I was at that show.
Okay.
And,
Um,
yeah.
what got you interested in you're interested in Ring of Honor or independent wrestling? I know you mentioned you were kind of a magazine and online presence, but was there like a particular after ECW was there like ROH or did you get CCW? Like what was the kind of the the thing you heard about that kind of sent you down the indie wrestling rabbit hole, so to speak.
Yeah, it was largely when WCW and ECW went out of business. It was like there's a lot less wrestling to watch now. It was just WWF at the time, so I thought, well, I need to expand my horizons a bit. There were a lot of talk about independent groups, sites like the Death Valley Driver. I remember someone was selling these 8-hour comps. I think it was someone named Wes. It was West Side comps. It was all these like tri-state area wrestling matches. It was like from CZW and Jersey All Pro and trying to think like groups in New York, thing like that.
Right.
And so I was watching all these. Yeah, I got these tapes. I'm watching all these guys, and then I find out they're all coming to New England. Like it was the first time Ring of Honor ran outside of Philadelphia, so I was like, oh, that's so cool. And I went to the first show, had a great time. That first show, it was the first Briscoe versus Briscoe match, and also Low Key versus AJ Styles, which was also
Okay.
a tremendous match.
Now
This is
this was
2002.
so this was the Murphy Rec Center shows.
No, this was in Boston.
Oh,
I
okay,
mean, it was
Boston.
first show
Gotcha.
was in Wakefield. Yeah, it was
Gotcha.
Wakefield,
Gotcha.
Mass. In
Gotcha.
2002. So yeah,
Um,
yeah, like 19 years ago. Jeez,
yeah, we're closing in on
20 years. Gonna
if
be
they,
next year.
if they can make it. It's always
Yeah,
gonna.
yeah. We'll see. We'll see if they limp to 2 decades.
uh, what is your? I guess we'll just go off on the tangent. What's your opinion on the current state of Ring of Honor, if you have one?
I mean, I watch the shows now are they're fine. They do a lot more kind of interview pieces to set up matches. I think it's pretty good. I don't know really what Ring of Honor like. What is it like? How does it stand out
Right.
compared to AEW or even Impact in a way? Like what is it? It's just kind
Right.
of the talent's fine. The television's by and large good. I think it's certainly stepped up a bit since they moved. Ever since they came back with the Pure tournament, I think it's been a lot better. But it's just hard to say. Like what are you?
Exactly.
Like
Uh,
what needs you? Like what hole do you fill in the world of wrestling?
it's kind of like you were at Madison Square Garden too. It's like their finest, biggest hour was also kind of like falling off the cliff almost.
Yeah, so the night they did everything, they made every bad decision.
Yes. Yes.
Like I remember, you know, Kenny King wins the Rumble and knocks out Jushin Liger and Keiji Muto, and everyone's just like, ugh. And then I remember he like didn't even get his promised title shot. Like it was just taken away, or he used it in a three-way or something dumb that didn't even pay off in any palpable way. It was just like, God Almighty.
I just remember kind of thinking like the best you can come up with for Jushin Thunder Liger is a goddamn battle royal. That was what I
Yeah,
said.
like how hard is it to have him win? Like I know he's not a Ring of Honor guy, but who cares? You
Or
could
just
bring him over.
give him,
You could build a show around his title shot. Be like, this might be his last chance or something like that.
or
And
even like just put him in a multi-man. Give him like, okay, hey, here's Liger and here's someone else.
yeah,
Give it a match. Don't put it on the pre-show that even the people that paid for this are not gonna see. But yeah, that was. Oh boy, I don't. We could talk for another hour about just how bad that show was, with the exception of like two matches on the card.
yeah, the New Japan stuff was by and large very good. It was just the Ring of Honor
All right.
stuff that was a little lacking.
Okay, so last part about that show, just because I know one of my friends is gonna listen to this, and we always have this debate. Was Matt Taven a good choice for Ring of Honor champion?
Oh, he sure wasn't. I mean,
Thank you.
given what we know about Marty Skrull, maybe he wasn't the best
True,
choice
true,
either.
true. But
But at the time, it's like, yeah, that's so easy, and
yeah,
I don't know. I mean, if you wanted to put it on him so bad, like you could wait a bit. Like there were so many people who bought tickets thinking, the Bullet Club was going to be there, and you should throw them a bone by having Marty at least win.
right,
And then then you could build like a Matt Taven, like build it in his hometown of do a show in Boston and build it to that, and I bet you do a good crowd out of that. But
right.
oh man, I remember Matt Taven gets that title. Everyone's just like, it was just like a balloon being deflated. Size of it's just like, it's like, oh no.
But the thing, and my friend always has this, he always says, like, right after that, they pun to the one guy in the crowd with a shirt that says Madison Square Taven. And I'm like, first of all, that's the worst shirt ever, because that's not even a pun. It's just changing a word. It's like saying, like, hey, we're at, the Skrull Lands, or I'm not trying to put over Marty Skrull, but you know what I'm saying.
Mhm.
Instead of the Meadowlands, it's the Skrull Lands or whatever, or the Rollins Lands. But oh, it's just bad.
I'll tell you a funny Matt Taven story.
Go,
I went to a
please.
show, a Ring of Honor show. It was the first time they had run back in New England and or like the Massachusetts in like 5 years or so. I forget what year this was. It was this was the night before Eddie Edwards won the Ring of Honor title. So
Okay.
it was like 2012, 13, something like that. And I went. I met up with Rob Naylor at the show, and we're sitting there, and Matt Taven's actually in the he was just a guy back then, and he comes out for the post intermission match. Whatever. I think he's fighting the Bravado Brothers or something like that. And this was after the incident where Matt Taven almost killed George Steele when he did a dive on him when he was just kind of an indie guy. I don't know if you remember that
I didn't
story.
know. I never heard about that.
Yeah, no, there was something where it was just in Massachusetts, like Matt Taven like did a dive on George Steele and like I think hurt him real bad. You can look that up.
Ooh, do
And
I
I remember
want to? I mean,
I don't know if there's footage of it, but the story
I,
is
I don't know if I want to. I don't know if I want to think any less of Matt Taven. I mean, he might be a nice guy. I'm not trying to bash
oh,
Matt Taven
great
personally,
guy.
but
But I just looked. There's a YouTube clip called Matt Taven almost kills George the Animal Steele. You can look that up at your own discretion.
yes.
But anyway, like this has happened, I think, fairly recently, and Rob's going all in like, Taven, you suck. You almost killed George Steele. And there's this like older couple sitting in front of us, and they keep looking back at Rob like, what are you doing and all that. And Rob, later we find out that's Matt Taven's parents who are sitting in front of us
Oh no.
while he's screaming for the head of Matt Taven. So that's kind of my number one Matt Taven memory outside of him almost murdering George Steele.
The only Matt Taven memory I have is I live in the St. Louis area, but I was so desperate to meet the Elite that I drove down to Nashville, Tennessee for a Ring of Honor TV taping, and that was the night that he punched Cody and gave like Cody the big shiner that he had for like 3 months. Um, and they sold so many meet and greets for the Elite that they couldn't do them all before the show, and they said like, guys, we promise we'll be back out at intermission. Well, that was the last show before intermission, so we got to Cody.
Oh,
We got to Cody, but then he has to walk with his eye like you can almost see like with every heartbeat, like the swole eye going dum bum dum bum dum bum, and he's taking pictures. He's smiling. He's getting everybody the time of day, but you're like, that poor man is in pain right now because of Matt
well,
Taven. So, uh, really appreciate you being on the show. Really
hey, no, my
appreciate your
pleasure.
time. It was you. I gotta want to thank you for helping me want to do something like this because you're one of the first people on YouTube that really was kind of like a YouTube person that I enjoyed and like would seek out and would get excited when I'd hear that there was a new video out. And I want to thank you for the inspiration behind me doing this small little channel in my small little area of the internet. And really appreciate your time, especially that you told me you're a very, very busy man. But just thank you for the great videos. I hope one day we get to see some more. And I just really appreciate you.
Hey, no problem. Thanks for having me on. This was a great time.
Is there you still active on social media or anything you'd like to put out there for anybody who may come across the video?
Twitter is at Joe Gagne, Gagne.
Awesome. And I'll put a link to that in the description box below. And want to thank everybody for having a listen to this. If you enjoyed, please give it a like, share, subscribe for more content, not just from the world of pro wrestling, but from the world of gaming, anime, comic books, and all things geek culture. And you can follow me on my social media pages, facebook.com/athleticgeekA9, Twitter at athletic_geekA9, Instagram athleticgeekA9. And if you would like to help improve the channel financially, I am on Patreon. Hit me up on Patreon.com/athleticgeeking9. Give Joe a follow. Check out his old videos if you haven't seen them yet. They're just tremendous work. And yeah, once again, really appreciate Joe Gagne for not only his videos, but for taking his time out. And we'll see y'all next time.